Good evening, everyone. This is a policy subcommittee meeting. I want to apologize in advance for the strange format today. I was in court in New Hampshire. I was not able to get back home or to my office in time, so I pulled over at a random Starbucks along the highway. Also, my laptop microphone is not working, so that's why you see me talking on the phone. I hope you like Adele, because that seems to be the background music. But in any event, why don't we go ahead and get started? First up is review of the minutes of the December 5th, 2022 DEIJ and policy joint meeting. Would someone like to move them?
Second.
Thank you, Stephen. All right, your vote, Valerie?
Yes.
Your vote, Stephen?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. So that now brings us to a discussion of the physical education and athletics policy, which can be found on I-59. We are joined by Athletic Director Kyle Williams. I put this on the docket because my understanding is that at a recent curriculum subcommittee meeting, the athletics department discussed its desire for us to have a program review and to perhaps make some policy changes. So looking at this from a policy perspective, I invited the athletic director and also some administrators from OTL to talk to us about our current policy and any modifications they might like to see to it. So without further ado, Athletic Director Williams, if you'd like to talk now, you can go right ahead.
Sure thing. Thank you for having me on. I'm Kyle Williams. I'm in my first year here as the athletic director at Brookline High School. I'm a BHS grad and have worked in the district for 10 years, but most recently was at Wellesley. So coming into this new role and working to get my feet underneath me, do some research and understand the dynamics of policy versus procedure in Brookline and the role of athletics, interscholastic athletics and otherwise in the district. OTL and just school leaders were fortunate, or I was glad they brought me to curriculum subcommittee a couple weeks ago, I think sometime in mid-December maybe. And we were able to present our desire to do a broad review of the program so we can get an understanding both internally, but also it's important to get that understanding externally about what the community is looking for from athletics, so we can understand the expectations and hopefully exceed them. Mr. Perlman had sent over in advance the policy booklet, pages 59 and 60 there, and what looks to be there is just a mission statement for athletics. It seems to be a pretty decent mission statement, but not one that necessarily has been updated, it looks like, since '97, and not one that carries with it any procedural guidance or policy guidance.
So are there some particular policies or practices that you would like to see embedded in that policy that would be helpful toward effectuating this mission?
It's a great question. I think I would need some understanding first of how policy and procedure interact with each other and what other departments, what types of policies live here for other departments versus live at the direction of the superintendent. That's something that I don't have a strong enough understanding of here in my first year to be able to say that here, this is this part of my department and it lives in policy versus living somewhere else. Right off the bat, I see things about physical education and girls interscholastics and gym time. That's above the athletics portion, but it seems to be all tied into one. So I guess I would maybe start with a question. Does athletics live anywhere but the pages? I'm sorry, I'm referencing page 59 of section 1, I believe, of the policy handbook. I'm wondering, does athletics live anywhere other than on page 59 and 60 in our policy document?
So indirectly, issues such as fees for participating in athletics, that would rest elsewhere.
Okay. And that's
Gabe,
it?
Pretty much, yes. Gabe, is there anything you wanted to add to that about if you think there needs to be any modification to this policy?
I think similarly to Kyle, there's probably some work to do to compare how the different areas are represented. So just on a quick skim with how some other curriculum areas are represented, in some ways it's similar that they're not really policies. by my sense. Like they're not directing us to do anything or operate in any particular way. There's some things that almost like dictate sort of curriculum scope. But I think in position as Kyle of sort of asking a question of like what it to lock into a policy versus keeping to our practices or other ways we kind of set procedure.
So can I just chime in here? So before this meeting, I was looking around to see what other districts do for their physical education policy. And it looks like, unsurprisingly, there's a range. But one that caught my eye was Boston Public Schools have the superintendent issued a circular for this school year. That's a policy circular for physical education and physical activity. It's a policy just for this particular year. It's 7 pages, but it's really robust. It has a lot of definitions in it, and it seems pretty ambitious. I think there are 7 points in it, or maybe I'm looking at it right now. And it's 7 pages long in any case. It seems like an interesting place to start if you're looking to see possible elements that you may want to consider for Brookline's physical education policy. The one thing I guess that I would flag is when you ask the question, is physical education covered elsewhere in the policy manual? That BPS circular does talk about wellness also, which is definitely also covered elsewhere in our policy manual. So I don't think this would be the place to David, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think we're talking about revising our wellness policy here. But there are elements I think that would be relevant to us.
Right. So something I would be interested in hearing from you, Kyle, and as well as you, Gabe, what is not currently working, and to what extent would clarifying through policy help improve the situation?
Can I ask a question first, actually, just to build off of Stephen's comments? And maybe it's semantics, but when talking about physical education and athletics and wellness, those are 3 distinct and interconnected departments, tracks. We've got a wellness department within which we have physical education and health education, and maybe some other components. And we have an athletics department, which for the most part and in practice is grades 9 through 12, interscholastic athletics. I'm not, and I think everyone here is clear, but I'm not responsible for physical education in the traditional classroom sense during the school day.
And we do have Carlin here who
I was going to say, can anyone see me? I'm here.
So I guess I bring that up only to try to understand or get on the same page with everyone as to what exactly it is we are talking about as we talk about physical education or athletics or wellness.
Can I also just mention that we actually extensively talk about physical education and health education in the section 3 of the current wellness policy that we're all revamping. It literally, to your point, Stephen, it talks about all PSB students, grades K through 12. It tells exactly how many days per week they'll have phys ed. It's very specific. And that's the work we've been working on all year, Maria, Trish, myself. So we're already looking at a part of physical education and health education in the wellness policy. So I wonder if we should just possibly merge or get more clarity but.
So I guess, Carlin, I have a question for you. Are you talking about the state law requirements for PE, or are you talking about something beyond the state law requirements for PE?
I'm talking about the Brookline wellness policy.
No, I understand, but are the PE requirements in there greater than the state requirement, or are they stating?
They're specific in terms of, what grade levels, which grade levels receive a certain periods per week of physical education. So they're more specific, I would say. Is that helpful?
Yeah,
Because
I
we
mean,
also have, you
I'm
can,
curious
you
if
can,
Brookline we're, I guess, using, if we're giving more PE than the state requires.
well, we are allowing students to utilize sports contracts and other ways in which to earn their wellness credit. So it depends on your perception of what the state requirement is, that we have to have physical education offered to every student every year. And then
Yeah,
we
just
have more
one
specifics around that.
kind of one, again, an example at the high school level is that the state doesn't say how many credits a student needs to earn. The state doesn't say like how many minutes or hours they need, but that they have to earn credit in wellness every year. And so the way we do class for the most part, in addition to the replacement credit through sports that Carlin is talking about, and that's relatively similar to how other communities do it with a kind of a partial class. Obviously, there is some variance between communities, but again, the state is not terribly specific. And so the idea that we specify further how we're implementing that seems reasonable.
Okay.
All
So-
right, so sorry, go ahead, Stephen.
So I was just going to say that the policy under I-59 is really thin, right? Like it's just got a statement of values, a mention of course requirements, not much else. So what's it doing? Like what's the is it satisfying some regulatory requirement, or is it doing something beyond the wellness policy that we needed to be doing? Sorry, maybe you know this already and I just don't. I guess I'm
Right,
asking the same
I
question.
agree,
you just
Stephen.
asked, right?
I have a similar question because I'm hearing that we need a program review, that there's some areas that are not currently working as well as they could. So the question then becomes, to what extent should we be updating our policy so that we can try to effectuate those positive changes? I'm glad to hear it reinforced that in the Wellness Committee, there's some work being done in this area. But I'm wondering if perhaps we can hear more about what it is that's currently broken or not working as well, and what needs to be done to fix it. And then that'll help inform us as a subcommittee about how we could craft a policy to try to ameliorate those concerns.
Sure. So Kyle, why don't I start from like a high level and then you can dig into some more specifics?
Sure.
Is it possible, because I think that there was a foundational question that a couple of you asked that we didn't really answer. I mean, David answers it best, but I'll try, which is policy versus procedure. So the couple things that I heard Kyle mention more specifically to me are procedure, and you too, Gabe, the things that you mentioned are, in my mind, are procedure. This committee tends to put overarching themes into a policy, right? And then how that, and with a report back often, or we, sometimes there'll be a directive to the superintendent or designee to do X, Y, or Z. But absent that direct designation, it's still implied that the administration are going to come up with the ways in which nuts and bolts in and out during the day, they effectuate that policy, right? So David, you always do this better than I do, but I just want to make sure that that was sort of out there as the delineation of the roles. We often, we try not to go into the day-to-day weeds because that's not our role. We want to make sure that you all are doing that, but I just wanted to, it gets muddy sometimes, so.
Yeah, that's full. And so with that, I think most of what Kyle and then Anthony Meyer, also head of school for the high school, since athletics is so heavily focused at the high school level, is like in our procedures or in our staffing, in how we budget. So I think, about you, Kyle has been really clear about how athletics has expanded, how participation is much higher in the last few years and over time, and that we haven't grown the staffing side of the department. And that there are some policy opportunities when it comes to kind of inclusion of students, right? And so we see this in the physical education section where there's, language about including girls. We could probably update that to be more inclusive in both athletics and in wellness, and about participation, right? I can imagine policies around coaches and how we support coaches and train coaches. And I can also imagine policies around how we do supervision at athletic events. Who is present. The MIAA has some regulations about when the athletic director has to be present for which sports, or things like athletic trainers. Obviously, all of those have budget implications because we have to then actually have people at those events, right? Or, create structures that allow for that. But I think that's a distinction where we may see some opportunities. Kyle, do you want to?
Yeah, no, just this conversation alone has been some helpful context and learning for me. Diving a little bit deeper, some other things that might, some other topics beyond just what Gabe has mentioned would be policies around transportation. I think that would be a policy more than a procedure. It's both, but a broad level policy would help to guide our transportation procedures. We have our own athletics handbook, which does cover a lot of our procedures. Sorry, I'm playing with my P's in my mind here. And that covers, how captains are picked and what conflict management protocol is and our principles of effective coaching. And it does have information about transportation. Another area that it is lacking in, and this is, I think someone had mentioned that fees, I think David maybe had mentioned that fees live elsewhere. It's lacking in information about fundraising and other support groups to athletics, and what relationship they have with the district and with the department. I don't know if that lives in policy. And part of the reason I'm actually asking for the broader holistic review is because a lot of these things don't have one single home. Athletics being sort of nebulous in how it fits into a traditional school or department. It doesn't have the same structures or the same needs that other departments necessarily do. And so from time to time, taking a look as a community to say, what is this that we're offering and how do we get on the same page about how we're going to operate it? I don't mind, and I enjoy the flexibility to make those decisions myself and to work with Gabe and with Anthony and with Dr. Guillory and others to help shape those policies and procedures. But the buy-in from the community and getting everyone on the same page, much in the way of a mission statement, but with some more detail in certain areas will be helpful. I don't know those specific areas today off the top of my head. That's part of the reason I actually would like the review, so that we can say, hey, this is actually concerning. This is the language that we're using now. It's not up to our standards. It doesn't match what we do at a district level or doesn't match surrounding communities. But I feel like that's work that we need to do to compare ourselves to others and to best practices. And I will continue. I do that work on my own a little bit with our, our league partners, with our surrounding schools, and with my own experience. But having a group that can take a look at it. It's not necessarily this group today. And I apologize if I was misleading in the subcommittee when I said policy would support. I think it will support, but I didn't immediately have a list of policies that I was ready to sort of ask for a look at. And I apologize if that was misleading.
That's certainly fine. That's very helpful explanation. Go ahead, Stephen.
I was going to say, it sounds like maybe a policy review or revision might be the end of a review process rather than the start of one. Once the curriculum, the staffing, and other elements are reviewed, perhaps policy could emphasize any shifts in values that we want the new direction to embody or something like that.
All right, that makes sense. Kyle, do you have an approximate timetable of when you sort of need these issues to be addressed? Or is there a certain specific issue that is more urgent than another, where a partial review would be helpful? Or
I will say, actually, to Gabe's point earlier, I think that both within athletics and wellness, but athletic participation related, that students' identity and the impacts that it might have on their participation in athletics would be something that would really serve the district and its students.
So Kyle, we're dancing around it a little bit. Are we talking about having the policy comport with MIA guidelines on gender identity?
My understanding is we are without a policy on gender identity and participation in athletics. We have one that was not voted on, maybe from 2014.
Yeah, it was a little bit later than that, but yeah.
Yes, that's what I'm referencing.
Okay.
All right, would anyone else like to comment on this agenda item? I do see that we have a couple of attendees. If you're interested in discussing this agenda item, please raise your virtual hand. I can have you promoted. If you're here to discuss a subsequent agenda item, that's fine too, and I will get to you later on. All right, Carolyn, go ahead.
I wonder, it's the 141 physical education, the first line of it where it says girls interscholastic co-ed gym equal time. I don't know if you're editing or looking at it from a high level, but I just wonder about why is it specifically talking about only the girls, and it mentions mandates co-ed gym physical. All of our classes are everyone. There's no gender division in any physical education setting. So I need to say that out loud and make sure that that gets into a policy or.
Yeah, I mean, I think that speaks to how old this is.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we knew that.
Yeah.
And also our health education, there's no separation.
Yeah. Again, I think that speaks to how old that these policies are.
Okay, thank you,
We
Valerie.
need to work on all of that.
Yeah. I mean, not to completely open a different can of worms, but as the other curriculum areas, a lot of them are quite old, getting to the early 90s or even earlier. And so some what's there for social studies or physical education, arts or like libraries, just really antiquated. And I think Stephen asked earlier, sort of what purpose does this whole section carry? Because statements, from my perspective, totally assign this subcommittee. Maybe there's a sort of like a
Gabe, I
teaching and
think you're
learning
cutting
section.
out. Either you're cutting out or I'm cutting out. One of us is.
No, Gabe's cutting out because I couldn't hear him either.
Okay.
Just really it and serves.
Gabe, maybe if you turn off your camera, that'll help.
And
I think the blizzard got him.
Right, seems like we've lost Gabe for now, but we can come back to him later on this topic if need be. Would anyone else like to be heard on physical education and athletics policies? All right, seeing none, thank you to those of you who came for this specific agenda item. It's much appreciated, and we will certainly be following up with you later, as well as discussing further an athletics program review. All right, so that brings us to our next agenda item, which is the alcohol, substance use, and prevention policy. This is on today's agenda because many of us on school committee have been receiving emails from concerned parents about vaping as well as cannabis use in particular, but also other substances. And to the extent that modifications to our current policy might help improve the situation, that's why we have this docketed for today. So I'm curious to hear from those of you in OTL or from Tricia Laham or Maria Litaz or anyone else, what your thoughts are on our current policy. And also maybe before then, if you could talk about what the current situation with substance use is in our schools, whether this is at any higher level than we've seen in past years, what mitigation efforts are underway, sort of an overview. So whoever would like to jump in.
I can start, and Maria probably has a lot more information than I do. Anecdotally, what I'm hearing is that there are concerns about vaping, concerns about marijuana, cannabis, edibles, not remarkably different than past years. COVID has changed things a lot with all kinds of mental and behavioral health concerns. So maybe there's more going on. We're not actually seeing that in school from what I'm hearing from a nursing perspective. So that could be different from a guidance perspective. Some things that we're doing the expert screening, the mandated screening, where we do motivational interviewing of 7th and 9th graders to talk about any substance use and determine if there's any need for intervention. It's a mandate. It's not my favorite tool because I don't think we're really reaching students and getting honest information. I think it might be relatively helpful at the 7th grade level to provide a lot of information and education and support. The 9th grade level, I feel like students are pretty savvy and many are still quite innocent, but also not always honest with this. So I don't think we're reaching the kids that we need to reach. I think
How is that? Can you explain how that's utilized? How is that given? Where is it, by the guidance department, or who gives that?
We've done it a couple of different ways. It's guidance and nurses, some wellness educators. In the beginning, we had all hands on deck to do it. It was a new protocol for us, a new mandate. So it was nursing, all guidance, social workers, wellness educators. Last year we did an online version of it because it was just so hard with COVID to get all our ducks in a row to do it in person. This year we're doing it back face to face. So it's mostly nurses and guidance doing it, coordinating it with the wellness educators. They might be doing scoliosis and we'll be doing the expert screening.
Thank you.
Just to expand on some of the other things that we're doing in the school, for the past few years, we have been utilizing some of the Project Here material, which we were able to acquire through a grant. And Carlin and I rewrote that grant in order to get more resources around that. The curriculum is part of the curriculum that's used as the Michigan model curriculum. We have also been recognizing that parents are an important partner in this work. So one of the initiatives of the school counseling department has been increasing the number of parent workshops around substance knowledge prevention, vaping. So we've already had one in the first half of the year, and we should have 2 more in the second half of the year. And then we also will be completing the youth risk behavior survey as another method of collecting data this year around understanding what we need to do as a district to increase our prevention efforts.
Of the YRBS, how have they been trending in terms of substance misuse and mental health over the last couple that you've done?
So the way it's been reported in the past, and this is actually one of the things that we're looking to do, is to have the data more effectively utilized to inform our practice. We haven't seen a tremendous increase, but certainly there is, substance use in the district. But we do want to look at going forward, how are we able to better utilize the data that we get from the youth risk behavior survey? And that's actually, we received another grant to do that from the Norfolk District Attorney's Office. Mm-hmm. So we're just trying to streamline the things that we're doing to be most effective in the schools.
Just in support of that, I'll say, Maria, Valerie, that we're going to, this spring, the implementation of the YRBS survey is hopefully going to be very comprehensive and hit all of our students whereas in the 2021 year, it was a smaller sampling of high school students. So as to Maria's point, with Fidelity, we're going to have a very comprehensive survey that we're planning on implementing this spring, and making sure that we get the most current data. I will also say that we are doing the Michigan model in 7th and 8th grade, and this will be our 3rd year, sort of since implementation. So we're going to be collecting some of that information about if it's working and how it's working. So we've done some pre and post. With COVID, there was some online pieces and a little bit of disrupted, but this will be the second year where we're implementing it with Fidelity across the district. I did notice in the policy, there is one part of it that talks about this comprehensive evidence-based drug prevention curriculum in programs grades 5 through 12. I will say that currently we only have health education in grades 7 and 8, and then again in grade 9 that all students must take. So that's something that I think if we would like to look at as a district, thinking about moving it comprehensive health education down into those sort of upper elementary, middle school, early
How
middle
would you
school area.
categorize the 5th grade health curriculum then?
So that is one unit taught in the spring by the classroom teacher. I'm supporting that work this year, but historically that has not been part of sort of this comprehensive health education model. But certainly, that would be another opportunity for us to have touch points with our students around these life skills earlier than.
I do want to compliment you and Tricia and Maria all. The middle school model, I've never received so much information on what's being taught and what's about to be taught, and parent forums have been, the caregiver forums have been great. So
Wonderful. We'll
kudos
come
on that.
Wednesday night. We're doing our sex ed forum for parents and caregivers.
Yeah, 7th grade. I'll be there. Yeah.
Great.
All right, so from a policy specific perspective, and we heard an example just now from Carolyn, are there any other areas in the current policy that we feel ought to be changed to better reflect current needs?
So there might be an opportunity just to adjust a little bit of the language to include nicotine delivery systems, such as e-cigarettes and vaporizers, and then maybe including some language around marijuana and THC products. So I also wanted to ask a question. If the policy in the student section, which is section J, the prohibition of use of alcohol, tobacco, and drugs by students, if that was also going to be coming up for review, because in some ways these are sister policies in a way. They talk about very similar things. Tricia mentioned the screening tool that we are required to use, and that's missing in our policy language. And it feels like it would be better in that, it would fit better in that students section J policy. So that's why I bring that up.
So I have a question for you, Maria, and this I think goes back to our sort of theme of today, which is policy versus procedure. Would it be better for us to just say a comprehensive without naming the specific one that you're using now in case that changes in a year? You know what I'm saying? I mean, you're using something that Tricia says she doesn't really like and maybe is going to change, at some point. So
Right. No,
so that's part of, like, on a policy level, I prefer, if we're going to change it, that we keep it to cover what we want to cover, but not necessarily name.
Oh, absolutely. I'm in complete agreement with you.
Okay.
Just the fact that we are missing the requirement that we utilize a screening
tool. Okay.
Yes.
Now, would the screening be replaced by a different form of screening or by something different entirely? I'm just wondering in terms of, from the language perspective, whether including screening, would cover the forecasted changes for future years? Or what exactly was meant by needing to move in another direction there?
Well, to be honest, I don't see any immediate change to the screening tool. It's adopted through the state. A lot of people like it. A lot of school nurse leaders and school nurses don't like it because we feel like it's not reaching students, but I don't see it going away anytime soon unless somebody is developing something better. So it's something better than nothing. I just don't think it's reaching who we need to reach.
I would agree with Tricia, because the state provides so much training and resources behind the SBIRT, which is the current tool that's being used. I don't see them also changing that. So that is naturally what districts will use because of all the resources the state puts behind it.
All right, thank you. Thoughts from any school committee members? Anything that you see in the policy that ought to be added? Go ahead, Suzanne.
Yeah, thank you. You know, the emails that we're getting though are not against what we're doing in terms of educating and helping the students. It's about students who are using the bathrooms at the high school for vaping and smoking, and how uncomfortable the other students are. So that's actually kind of a different issue in some ways. And I don't know what the answer is, but I mean, that's kind of what the emails are saying. They're saying they're worried that their students, their children are in the bathrooms and it's filled with smoke, whether it's vaping, cigarettes, marijuana. And they're not saying that we are not doing the right curriculum or that we're not working well with students and we're not doing guidance. That's kind of what they're saying. So, you know, that may be procedure and not policy, but that's what I'm hearing that they're worried about. So it's a slightly different issue than what we're talking about.
I'm hearing that too, but to the extent that policy can help effectuate changes in those behaviors or in certain enforcement mechanisms, I'm curious to receive staff input as well as school committee input, of course, and that of the public. Speaking of which, we have two attendees who'd like to be heard on this topic. Robin, if you could promote both Susan Park and Carolyn Thal. Hi, Susan. So go ahead and introduce yourself and speak when you're ready.
Okay, thank you, David. Hi, everyone. My name is Susan Park. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 17, and it's nice to see everyone. Nice to see Maria and Tricia, and I see Carolyn there too, Stephen and David. Thank you. Hi, Carolyn. Yeah, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about the concerns that I'm hearing from BHS parents and neighbors and friends. And I shared a letter with Nancy and Jen because on the school committee meeting from last week, they had both mentioned during the meeting that students were contacting them because there's smoking, vaping, cannabis in these bathrooms and how uncomfortable it is for them. Now, simultaneously, I'm also hearing from my friends whose kids go to BHS and they are saying the same thing. You know, they're like, my kids, you know, I feel bad for them because they want to use that bathroom. It's closer. You know, they have a class to get to. You know, it's flu season. They want to wash their hands, but they go upstairs because they know that that bathroom it's very uncomfortable because there's like cannabis smoke, there's vaping. And then the third thing is I was at the steering committee for the warrant article 9 that passed. I was one of the co-petitioners. So the town has put money aside to do a study on cannabis and the effects it's having on the town and youth in particular. And so there were 2 students there who are seniors, and they too were very upset about this, concerned. And I was so proud of them that they mustered up the courage to show up and to share that. So in the last month, I'm being bombarded by the same issue. So that's why I wrote the letter, and thank you, David, for emailing that there's this meeting tonight. So yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to share like, clearly the issue is the bathrooms. Practically speaking, what can be done so that all the other kids who want to use that bathroom so that they can make it to class on time, they don't have to go upstairs. I feel like, it's an equity thing for everyone else who doesn't smoke. And, I'm wondering if there's, if it's appropriate to put in the policy, like about the bathrooms and the bathrooms being smoke-free, drug-free, cannabis-free. Maybe the bathrooms have, I don't know how to work the educational piece into these different rooms, but I feel like this is an ongoing perpetual thing, and it's kind of sad. It's just really sad to hear it from multiple sources. So
I have a question for Trisha, Maria, Carlin. Is this what Susan just described? Is that in the BHS handbook somewhere? A prohibition against smoking in the bathrooms? Is that in the student handbook?
Well, the prohibition of substance use anywhere in
Right.
the schools, right?
Is in the- is it
I'm
in-
not
I just
sure-
wanted-
To speak specifically to the bathroom, I cannot recall immediately, but there's just a prohibition for substance use anywhere.
Right, I don't have the handbook in front of me, nor have I read it in a while, but clearly alcohol, vaping, any drug are not allowed on any of the school campuses. I have heard some of what Susan is saying, some concerns about bathroom use. When we did expert of the freshmen, vaping is one of the questions that is asked about, and the freshmen, nobody's doing anything in this response. But they also said in the 22 Tappan building, they don't see that as the concern that they hear about as being more prevalent at the main campus. Whether that's true or not, but I asked all the students that I screened, I asked pointedly about that, asked students what they thought we could do differently or better to get our messaging out to support them who might not want to use a bathroom. So freshmen are denying it as being an issue. So upper class, they weren't part of our screening, so I can't speak to that. At the Wellness Summit, my table was actually talking about vaping. I think it was strictly vaping. And the student members of our table felt very strongly that more teacher presence was not the answer. That kids still need to use the bathroom in private and not be running into their teachers or have their teachers monitoring every bathroom. So it's interesting from a student perspective what they think would be helpful and what wouldn't, because that seems like the go-to response. More staff out and about, more staff patrolling bathrooms seems like a logical solution. According to students, that would not meet their needs.
All right, thank you. Any other thoughts from school committee members on this issue specific to bathrooms? All right, Carolyn Thal, if you want to go ahead with your remarks.
Sure, thanks, David. Thanks, everybody. I wasn't really planning to speak, but I was listening in, and I'm sorry, I'm going to jump around. I guess I want to thank Suzanne, you're still there. I think Suzanne captured this well. Maybe this particular subcommittee isn't going to have jurisdiction over this issue if it's a jurisdictional issue or not a policy issue. I would like to say that I would really like to support Susan and so many parents and kids. And I'm not one of those parents and my kid isn't one of those kids, but we're hearing this, and with all due respect to staff and Trisha, who's amazing. I guess I just feel like surveys are, I don't think that's giving you a lot here. And I would implore leadership to listen here to parents and to kids. This is something that's making children, students, young adults, people uncomfortable on a daily basis. So I know this group deals with, you know, all kinds of issues. You know, you guys have been grappling with hate speech issues and behavior that thank goodness happens only very occasionally. This is every day. And I don't have a prescription. I don't have anything in particular I would be asking for here, except to, I'm perplexed as a town meeting member, and we've been grappling this in town meeting for a few years now in a few different ways. And Susan has been a leader on that. The notion that there's no more cannabis use than there used to be or there ever was, I find impossible to believe. It is normalized. It is legal. I mean, just the other day, I was driving with my daughter past Bonetta, and she was like, oh, there's so-and-so's sister going to Netta to get the Netta stuff that she then sells on. And it's like normal, and someone's sister does it. We were all in high school. I'm 55. I used to smoke lots of pot. I don't anymore. That aside, like it's so prevalent, and that's largely because of the availability and the mechanisms, the delivery mechanisms. You can use cannabis without smoke and without the odor that we all are familiar with, or some of us are familiar with. So there's two things. I just would really love to see some, you know, continued listening, respect, and elevation of this issue. And I do find it frustrating to hear the notion that it's not more, because it is. So it just is, and we all know it. So sorry, not my most articulate, was just jotting notes while making chicken wings. Thanks everybody for all your work.
Suzanne?
Yeah, thank you, David. I just a little history. When my own children were at the high school, which is a while ago, I will say, and Dr. Bob was the head of school, Dr. Weintraub. He had them smoking outside. So I don't know if that was good or bad, but at least the bathrooms were clear. They didn't have to go in the bathroom and sneak something. They just went outside. It was right there in front of the high school. You could see it. Again, I don't know if that was a better way to handle things or not, but that was his way of handling it. So just a little
It's a terrible way, if you want my opinion.
Yeah, could be, Trisha, but I'm just telling you what he did a while ago.
Wait, Trisha, why do you say that actually? I'm interested.
Why students could stand on the corner in front of the high school and smoke. It gave a very bad message, a health message. It's not even legal, and we're turning our back on it with kids doing it. I think it was a very bad idea. I had a son who was in high school at the time and actually started smoking.
I would
So it functions like an advertisement for it. I guess one of my reactions to this discussion, honestly, has been, I wonder if there's a place in the policy to emphasize that the campus itself is a no-use zone, to state it more explicitly. Because when I was reviewing the policy itself, I mean, maybe the campus is extended to the space outside the school itself. It's not just defined as the building and its interior, such as the bathroom, but it's only that third paragraph, and it's not really emphasized, although I don't know the extent to which wordsmithing that third paragraph is going to make a material difference in the culture at the high school. Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry, Trisha. I was reacting at this point because I was thinking like maybe the policy should focus more on making sure that students who are inside the school if they don't wish to be exposed to, they shouldn't have to be exposed to any kind of smoke. And at least outside you can get away from it easily. Inside you can't.
Back when they did this, when they allowed it in the day, there would be a large group of kids who were smoking. So cigarette smoking was more prominent back in those days than it is now. Vaping is kind of changing that trajectory because more people are starting to use that than would have otherwise. There would be a huge group. It would be hard to walk from the main campus to the UAB or to 22 Tappan to get through the big group of kids out there smoking. And it felt, that didn't feel great for those students. So it wasn't inside the building, it still was intimidating.
And I will second what Trisha's saying, having been there and watched students who, you know, probably wouldn't have started using, but when it looked like it was okay and there's a social factor and there's a lot of hanging around after school, literally like right there across the street from the high school. So there wasn't, I had students that said they probably wouldn't have started had they not wanted to hang out with their friends.
All right, thank you. Robin, could you promote Yuri Mariash? I think he would like to participate as well.
David, Susan has her hand up as well.
I'll get back to Susan as well. I just want to make sure that everyone has a chance to speak at least once before we go to round two.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
We can, yes, go ahead.
And I apologize again for not emailing ahead of time. I just swamped at work a little bit, so behind my email. But I did want to voice a comment that I also, now that I'm on this crusade of talented and gifted and enrichment program, started getting involved in more of the work that you guys do. And thank you again for taking the time and investing so much in our town and in its school system. So just two comments. The first one is regarding this specific topic, which I heard from my neighbors who have kids attending Brookline High, that this is a real problem, and I can understand both sides of the issue that you guys are deliberating here in terms of, you know, how can you create a policy that can be also effectively enforced to really try to remove this presence of substances and smells in the bathrooms, especially considering that, you know, probably many of the kids in the high school are not interested in being exposed to them, while also not creating a situation where we're creating a zone for smokers that could potentially attract others. So just bringing it up as an issue that I heard that is of concern. And then second issue is my favorite topic of how do we create an excellent public school system in Brookline by, you know, helping all types of students, including, you know, talented and gifted like programs. So if there's a good portion in this meeting to bring that up as a policy, I'm just looking for ways to influence, you know, the town moving forward and creating an option to really stand and shine, you know, academically as a town. And I know, guys, you heard me talk last Thursday in the public meeting. So it's comment number 2, and I'll stop right there.
All right, thank you. Susan, go ahead.
Okay, thanks, David. Yeah, and well, I want to mention, I know that Maria had said that, you know, the numbers indicate that the smoking, you know, it's not increasing too much, but I do know also after speaking with Mr. Kalinsky, John Kalinsky from the health department, he, having had multiple meetings with him, he has said that due to COVID in the last couple of years, those numbers are, he can't really say that they're completely accurate because, you know, the students, a lot of them were not even in school, you know, so they couldn't really take those surveys. So that's one concern. And then, you know, I think what Stephen was saying, I really like that idea of explicitly putting in the policy about bathrooms, like just in the policy saying that the campuses, especially the bathrooms, have to be smoke-free. Now, how to get there, I'm sure this is going to include conversations with the principal and all the other leadership at the high school. But I do think that, I think it is a problem because, people have been calling me, I'm getting emails because I'm a town meeting member, and they're saying that their kids have to go upstairs, or they just don't want to use the bathroom, even though they need to, because like right now I have a cold and been sneezing like crazy. I have to wash my hands, and so kids are inconvenienced. And so as an educator myself, I know that policy, of course, is important because it's like, the policy needs to be written so that it can be practiced. But then I feel like there's a gap there. It's like there's policy, but then, and like perhaps students are getting substance abuse education, but honestly, like they're supposed to get it in 7th grade. My daughter in 7th grade, she didn't get anything on substance abuse. She and her friends, like I surveyed them all, and they're like, no, we didn't get any. We learned about sex ed, but we didn't learn about that. So I feel like as an educator myself, we all know that things can be written in policy, but whether it's taught or not, that's another story. And it's just really frustrating that, I have a kid at home right now. We could be having dinner, but I have to, go to all these meetings to be the voice for these students, and the only reason why this all happened is because even at the school committee meeting, 2 of the school committee members mentioned it too. And so then I'm getting a flood of emails like, did you see that on the school committee? That is not okay. But then I'm like, well, actually, I was also on a steering committee call because we want to get all stakeholders on at the table for this study committee, because Warrant Article 9 passed. And then the students are saying the same thing. So we can't ignore it. We cannot just say, well, the policy has this. Like, this has been raised so much that I'm just asking, like, what are we going to do about it? We have to do something. And maybe it's a conversation with, the principal. I don't know. And so that's why I'm here. I'm asking you, to our respectable school committee members, like, what do you think we should do about this? I don't feel comfortable as a town meeting member just like having come and shared it. I really want to know, like, what are we really going to do? And so that it's impactful, that, the kids can use the bathroom and that they know that there's going to be no smoke in there because someone's cracked down on them and said there's no smoking allowed. And I don't know if it's to put the SRO officers back in, SRO officers, I know that they weren't just police officers. I know that they had an educational piece too. They came in, they gave workshops, they did, from what I heard, they also did substance abuse education. If there were SRO officers, would they be kind of at least in the hallways where these bathrooms are inundated with smoke? I don't know, but maybe that's an idea. And I know that with SRO officers, it's not like they would have to, I don't know if they would be there all day, every day, but they would, from what I heard, they come in with street clothes. They're not in their gear. Like, maybe they don't have to look a certain way. They come but then you have them there, like teaching, leading, and checking to make sure there's no substances in the bathrooms. So that's just another idea. Maybe also it's just like, putting grotesque grotesque pictures of lungs in the bathrooms, like this is what's going to happen if you keep smoking, or just like something. And from what I know, it's from what the parents are telling me, I don't think it's fresh in the freshman building. I think, well, it's seniors that are all speaking out. So the seniors are speaking. I think it's the neighbors who have contacted me, they have a sophomore. So, sophomores are probably not in the freshman building, but yeah, so I just implore you, please do something. I just feel bad not having an answer for them, but I can do my part, which is come here tonight and say to please do something, and to write a letter, and to contact the superintendent, and to these 2 school committee members who did speak on this last week. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Tricia, go ahead.
Thank you. I guess the more we talk about this, the more I think there's probably not so much that is policy that we're talking about. There's a lot of procedural things to be worked out. I don't think there is any student or staff member who is not aware that vaping, cigarettes, or drugs are not allowed on campus. The broader education needs to happen with parents. There's a lot of education. We're doing it with parents. There's always more that needs to be done. There's more that needs to be done with students. I just don't know that that necessarily falls into the policy, unless you want to talk about instituting policy to start health education in 6th grade. That's something I would support. The rest of it feels more procedural to me. I think it's a great conversation. I'm not sure that this is the place for it. I think it's good, but just those are my thoughts.
All right, would anyone else like to be heard on this? Susan's had a fresh hand that's up.
Oh, here, wait, I will just say, like, yes, thank you, Tricia. This is 6th grade, but I think at our, because I was at Tricia's table when we were working on the policy together. And I think they had even mentioned 5th grade. Isn't that right, Tricia?
I think 5th grade is written in the policy right now, but it's done, as Carlin had mentioned, by classroom teachers. So that is happening. And then 6th grade is not happening. So that was what was discussed at the Wellness Committee. So.
Go ahead, Maria.
But I had another comment, but from that perspective, I know Carlin and I have been advocating for health education in 5th and 6th grade, just because we see the benefits of introducing prevention education and other wellness education at an earlier age. So I'll just say that. But just going back to what we're speaking about now, as far as the policy aspect of it, some of the things that we are talking about are more geared towards the section J in the students policy, the prohibition of use of alcohol, tobacco, drugs by students. So I just want to make sure that we are keeping them separate. And if we want to talk about those things, that belongs in the other policy, and not so much in the prevention policy that is on the docket tonight.
All right, it does sound to me that there are perhaps some minor modifications that need to be made to the policy we're discussing today to, at minimum, bring it into alignment with practices, or to the extent that we are in a position already to extend education on substance use down to 5th grade, to make sure we're actually doing that, or if it's going to be 6th grade, to put in 6th grade, add some language explicitly mentioning vaping and e-cigarettes, cannabis, et cetera. So I think there's some minor changes at minimum that we can make. And I agree, Maria, that also makes sense to, in tandem, look at any modifications that we would make to the J section policy that prohibits use by students. I'm wondering what committee members feel about emphasizing in some way that use of substances indoors, in particular, would be frowned upon. Perhaps saying zero tolerance, it's prohibited on campus, period, but zero tolerance for indoors. If that in any way would have an impact.
David, I think saying zero tolerance, I think that probably infringes on the building's disciplining policies. I would want to know more about what the school wants to do with regards to disciplinary consequences. But I like the idea of including additional language, making more explicit that campuses are drug-free zones. Maria, would you mind pointing us to exactly where in J the prohibition language is? Because I did not, for one, realize there was that additional policy. I'm sorry to say.
I'm also wondering whether it makes sense either in a subsequent meeting or perhaps just David with Anthony or Hal offline to ascertain what the ramifications are on a first, second, third offense before we put in things like zero tolerance that might perhaps get a student in more trouble than we necessarily want when we want to educate more, particularly on a first.
I would want to reserve that prerogative to the building as per our current policy, which sets that discipline, which derogates that right to the building, if I understand it correctly. Sorry, Maria, but would you mind pointing us where in J that prohibition language is?
I just 1 second, my computer's
Okay.
so slow.
I'm wondering if that language is already there to some extent and I just didn't see it.
Meanwhile, Susan, you have something else you'd like to say?
Yes, thanks, David. Yeah, yeah, so when Trisha, myself, and a bunch of other people were working on this policy through the Wellness Committee over a month ago, I know that we had also mentioned, I think health class is the first semester in freshman year, but that is the only time that they have health. And I'm wondering with, and I think we talked about this already, but I'm wondering in the policy if there needs to be more health class, considering the increase of, cannabis businesses in town. And, there's probably going to be social consumption cafes down the road, and so I'm wondering what you all think of just one semester of health, and I'm sure that one semester they have to break those time slots with other topics. I know that by upperclassmen, like 11th and 12th grade, they have all those AP classes and kids are trying to squeeze in as many honors classes so their resumes look good. But I'm just wondering in the policy if I can't remember how much substance abuse education there is in the high school. If maybe Trisha could.
I guess, Susan, I just wanted to speak to this a little bit with my perception of it, which is, and Suzanne is on here now from curriculum. I think Stephen's on curriculum as well. That to me, it would make sense instead of us at policy doing that off the cuff to hear a proposal go through curriculum and understand both how it fits into the curriculum and then also any budget impacts it may have.
I agree with Valerie. I think this would need to go through curriculum first because there are some broader implications. Would anyone else like to be heard on this topic? If not, we'll move on to our next one.
Do you guys take that to the curriculum people? What's the process for that? Should I reach out to them or do you do that, or?
We can both do it.
Yeah, I'm here, Susan. I'm not sharing the curriculum, so I will take that with me to talk to our new interim director.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so why don't we move on to our next topic now? But first, I would like to thank Susan and Carolyn, as well as Yuri, for participating in this discussion. I do always like to welcome public input on our policy items. You're welcome to stay for our next agenda item, of course, which is a possible creation of a sustainability task force. So the reason this is coming up, I have been receiving emails and calls from those who would like to know where we are headed next in terms of actually achieving what we set out as our aspirational goals in the sustainability policy that we passed in the fall. And one clear and obvious problem, to me at least, and I think many others see this as well, is we don't really have very strong coordination at the moment. There are a lot of great sustainability initiatives that are taking place, but they are taking a place in silos. And so to the extent that we can create some mechanism by which to bring all the stakeholders together and have some kind of comprehensive process by which we work to achieve the goals that we set out to accomplish, I think that would be very helpful for us to do. I believe that one possible way to do that would be to create a sustainability task force. And my vision for what the task force would look like is it would loosely resemble panels 1 through 4 that we had during the pandemic, where we would encourage community members to apply to be on the task force. We would then select who would serve on that task force. They would meet periodically. They would discuss ideas, make recommendations to the school committee, and also just perhaps keep us grounded as a committee about where we were at. Even just as a communication mechanism, I think it would improve where we currently stand. So I'd like to hear what others think.
So a question for you, David, is that task force then vis-a-vis the policies that we passed? Or are you looking more for a town-wide inventory perspective? So like a summit, maybe to kick it off, where we have an inventory of the policies that, you know, have passed via warrant articles, or at the town level in some way, you know, via select board or preservation committee or zoning, or, you know, what have you, or just the school policies?
I'm thinking it would be both, because we don't get to control what takes place on the town side, but of course, it's highly relevant to know what's going on the town side. So I would like it to be vis-a-vis the policy we pass, but to also certainly encourage partnership with the town side and have a regularly scheduled meetings with the town side as well, to make sure that we are fully coordinated.
David, a couple of questions for me too. First, I'm sure you know that I'm very much in support of an idea like this. Why the policy subcommittee?
Well, because it was a policy that we passed in the fall, and we are hoping to have the school district in compliance with it. Now, obviously, it's difficult to accomplish everything overnight, but we want to be methodical in our approach and actually have some kind of system in place where we try to accomplish more and more. And currently, we don't really have that structure.
So would you envision this as something like a committee that would make recommendations about how to successfully operationalize the sustainability policy?
Yes.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
But I also would like to hear what you think and what Valerie thinks and anyone else who's at this meeting.
So I'll just say, when we talked about this initially, I remain behind the idea that the school committee can do more to create mechanisms to provide more lasting support and coordination to the various environmental/sustainability initiatives. Oh, thanks, kiddo. Initiatives across the district. But I think that was met with a lot of questions from the school committee. So are you seeing the change as being, now that there's a sustainability policy, an initiative like that, now is the time is right for that? Or are you seeing it as, sorry, I got a little distracted. Or are you seeing a slight pivot from that as being more about operationalizing the policy itself, not necessarily about support and coordination?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think the initial concern and resistance was that it would create extra effort for staff, and that staff already is spread very thin, and that also there would be some budgetary constraints. But if the purpose of this panel is to try to come up with ideas to allow us to operationalize the different elements and the goals we've set out, with the understanding that we can't necessarily do everything right away, but keep track of what it is that we are doing, what it is that we can do, and have, I look at it from the same perspective as a capital improvement plan, for instance. So the capital subcommittee, they have 3-year goals and 5-year goals and even 10-year goals. And I'd like to see us do something similar with sustainability. And some items are going to be too cost prohibitive at the moment. Unfortunately, we can always look for grants and see how we can fund it and work with our partners on the town side. But if we don't have some kind of mechanism in place by which we're even conducting these evaluations, it's hard to make progress on anything.
Okay, one last comment. One other reservation I remember hearing initially was the lack of a potential admin liaison. So one position that seems like a likely admin liaison for a panel like this would be the position that Sasha Palmer has been looking to post. I'm not sure if it's yet posted for a sustainability coordinator. I don't know the status of that position, but I think given that it's a funded position now, to my understanding of at least 2 years, that could be a reservation. That could be a way of responding to that school committee reservation. I'm thinking out loud about the previous reservations that held ideas like this back.
I agree with you. I think that's a very good idea.
Okay.
I also am, I sort of just want to put out there again, summit maybe not be the right word, but just an inventory of all that's going on, right? Just at this last town meeting, David, I don't know, remind me if it seemed like at least 10 warrant articles, right, that touched on sustainability, environmental issues in some manner, some of which would have applied to schools if they'd passed, some that may well in the future. And, so, and that's just one town meeting, right? That's not policy that's happening at the zoning board. That's not best practices that are happening maybe on the Driscoll project, or things they're thinking about for peers, or, things like that. So I do think that just understanding not just the policies, but also the players and the entities, and really bringing them all together, at least at the outset, even if they don't all end up on this panel-like structure on this task force, to at least meet with them, survey them on ideas, even if they don't have either the time to commit, or it would just be too unwieldy a group.
I agree. I really like the idea of having an inventory taken so that we actually have a better idea of what's going on and are able to keep track of all the efforts. And that's sort of what I meant by communication, but inventory is also a good way of putting it, because that's certainly an element that is missing. If we don't even know fully what's taking place, then it's hard to pursue the goals that we set out in our policy. In some of my communications with Roger Grandy, who's here as an attendee, he provided some specific examples to me of areas that would have been low cost, that would have helped us meet some of the goals that we established in our policy. So that's certainly an example of where having very eager volunteers who are experts in this area and know what's going on a panel, they can help apprise us of these developments, and we can take action where possible.
That's great. So can I just recap this? What I'm hearing is 3 potential elements of a mandate for a committee like this. One would be recommendations towards operationalizing the sustainability policy. That's it broadly. The second one perhaps is a subcategory, maybe it's standalone. It's recommendations towards the coordination and support of PSB initiatives and environmental / climate sustainability and PSB. And then the third one is, as Val said, this probably should be the first one. It's really and this is a more discrete activity. It's a mapping or an inventory of existing environmental, green, sustainability initiatives across PSB specifically, right? Well, not, or are you thinking the town?
I think the town, because I think that for a couple of reasons. I think that there are things that may apply to us or just maybe good ideas that we want to adopt. But I also think that in talking to folks who are leaders on groups that aren't necessarily, that could be sort of nonprofits, right, that operate within Brookline on these issues.
So then,
that-
then it would be
that
natural, I think, to lead to
Ideas,
Jessica.
well, they may have ideas, right, that are coming, say, the next town meeting or something like that, that maybe we want to support. And we are perhaps in the ground floor of working on that as from a proactive perspective, as opposed to a reactive one, once we have that inventory.
All right, very good. Would anyone else like to be heard on what their vision would look like for a sustainability task force? Suzanne?
Yeah, thanks, David. I just want to say, we do have a director of sustainability in the town. I don't know the exact title, but it seems like, and I don't know the person, but it seems like there should be some help there for the schools in terms of the job. So I don't know where that fits into this task force, but I think, we need to acknowledge that we do have a position in town. And, someday when we have extra money, we may have a position just for the schools. But until that happens, we've got to work with who's trying to do the work as well. So somehow that should be coordinated with this task force or panel that we're going to have.
I agree. It would definitely be important to include him in that process. Anyone else? Roger, would you like to speak to this at all? If so, raise your virtual hand and I can ask for you to be promoted. Robin, could you promote Roger Grandy?
Hello. Sorry, I'm cooking dinner. I didn't know I was going to be going on. But thank you for inviting me, David. So, I think one of the correspondence you referred to was, I assume, mine. We had a little correspondence recently. I'm not sure what I can add to what has been said already, but I'm, obviously really pleased and would just support the idea that I think, a summit, at least in education within the schools, would be great. There was a lot of individual initiative, and it is largely individual initiative as far as I can tell. Student work, some staff, some curriculum design. I think there's ways, as I, indicated to you in that last note I sent you a few weeks ago, to do some, again, low budget, at least initially, curriculum work, doing an inventory, K to 12, finding where sort of the best and easiest points of access could be to start thinking about adding in climate justice curriculum. Excuse me, by climate justice, I mean not just thinking about climate change and sustainability, but how that intersects with other things that we already prioritize and value, such as race and racial justice work, because it obviously interacts quite closely with climate vulnerability. So I do think, again, starting with some sort of summit, doing some sort of inventory, having a panel of people, both including people from in and without the schools. I think about, for example, people in emergency medicine who live in Brookline, and they're seeing, on the front lines, patients who are dealing with some of the both mental health and physical health stresses. So I think there's a lot of expertise that could be brought in quickly and thoughtfully. And then again, I think, as I envision it, sort of making recommendations, both not just in curriculum, but in other practices as well, sustainability practices, and then letting, whatever staffing is responsible begin to think about integrating it. One area, well, I'll just say, I think indicative of sort of where we're at is composting at the high school, for example. It's really being in many ways driven right now by DPW and dedicated staffing they have, but they're really running up against, and myself and other staff and students have been working with them, trying to coordinate, thinking about how to strengthen that. And I don't see it as sort of the magic bullet, but it's kind of a gateway activity to begin to create a sustainability culture in the schools. But there's just been really no real support from leadership. Sorry, my camera this one off. There's really not a mechanism for doing the training. And yet it seems like such a low-hanging fruit way to begin to think about sustainability and bringing that into our schools. So I think there's a lot of people that need to be brought in at least 1 or 2 times, including some school leaders, and to really kind of bump that up on their radar. But also to impress upon people that this is not some huge, expensive initiative that is prohibitive. There's many ways, I think, to make sustainability much more a part of our school culture.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, would anyone else like to be heard on this? Okay, I would like to move that we recommend to the full school committee the creation of a task force that will have the 3 goals that Stephen very adroitly summarized.
Second.
Is there a second? Thank you, Valerie. Valerie, your vote?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yeah.
And I also vote yes. All right, so that brings us now to new business. Any new business?
Not for today, but maybe to think about and work on it. I heard it from Kyle earlier that we really perhaps need to bring back that 2018 or 2017 policy that started getting worked on, and do some more on that.
Right. Okay, Susan, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, hi. And I'm not sure if, sorry, I want to be appropriate with the itinerary and the agenda. Did you guys already talk about the enrichment and gifted program? Or the enrichment and gifted? Because I just wanted to mention something about that.
Very briefly brought that up. This is new business, so go right ahead.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I was just looking at the enrichment and gifted part of the policy, and it says here that hold on, let me just look at this. Yeah, there's a lot of there's 2 big paragraphs and 5 points on how there's enrichment and gifted programs. And I know that there used to be ECS coordinator, there was the ECS parent liaison in each of the 8 K through 8 schools. And I think the ECS program got chopped in the last couple of years. So there's a discrepancy there, it's like in the policy, there's no more ECS. So I do think that there are a bunch of students who, from my background being an educator as well, and one of my colleagues, when we taught, she got her master's in enrichment education, and I just remember her saying over and over again that students who do fall in that category, if they are not challenged, if they don't have that enrichment, what happens is they zone out and then they get depressed. So I totally understand the whole equity thing, but I feel like for students who need enrichment, it's also an equity issue, because if they're not getting that challenge, they too will fall by the wayside. So I just wanted to mention that it is important. Florida Ruffin really has a beautiful makerspace, and I think that was put in there when we did have the ECS program, and it's just so sad that it's just sitting there idle. And I will say, just because my older daughter, who's now graduated from college, she used to be in the traditional enrichment gifted program, which was when they, you know, like back in the day, even with us, if you were gifted, or they would pull you out of class and then you went to a different class for, you know, once a week or something like that. But now the ECS program is enrichment challenge support. So the ECS coordinators work with the teachers, but it's no longer here. So I'm just wondering, I just wanted to throw out new business. Like, I wonder if there's something we could do to, you know, to help students who actually need that challenge.
Susan, can I suggest that you make that comment again at the school committee meeting on February 2nd? There's going to be, I believe it was February 2nd, right? That's the next public comment about the budget. I think that's a really appropriate comment to make at that meeting also, when I'm hoping that we hear people advocate strongly for what they think needs to be included in the budget that we're going to be reviewing. I think that's a really appropriate forum to be making that comment as well.
Okay, great. And then my question for you guys is, in high school, I think the ECS program, there is none because there's honors classes. Is that right? I think.
I'm not 100% sure on that, but I can get back to you. Does someone else know?
What are you, I'm sorry, are you asking if there are honors classes at the high school?
No, if there's ECS or some kind of enrichment beyond honors and AP.
Well, yeah, I don't know for sure, I guess. I'm thinking not, because that is what AP is, and that's what honors is their
Right, so that's what I was thinking, right?
advanced classes and, right,
And also, yeah, would be the enrichment or the
right.
challenge classes, right?
There are also independent study opportunities. So to the extent that that would be seen as enrichment. So I take it that your focus would be more enrichment at the K-8 level?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, makes sense.
All right, well, thank you for that input. Sorry, go ahead, Suzanne.
No, that makes sense to think about the K-8 rather than the high school.
All right, any other new business? Seeing none, thank you very much, everyone who participated. We had some robust, high-level conversations today, and we will certainly continue on these topics at future meetings. So, good night, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you for
everybody.
all your
Good
work.
night.
Night.